So
Very
I
good
would like
evening.
to I would like to welcome all the students as well for staying tuned with us and getting this session. So over to you, ma'am. Let's start the session.
Sure. So, good evening, everyone. And as you know, my name already, I'm Meghna. And we are meeting here today to discuss the English section of ACT examination and specifically the punctuation part and the rhetoric questions part of the ACT examination. Okay. So let me tell you that uh, there are around 13 to 16 questions on punctuations, and there are plentiful questions on rhetoric devices. Basically, ACT has this a beautiful trait that they give you so many instructions in the questions. So when you see a lengthier question, instead of getting scared or afraid of it, take it as an opportunity. And believe me, the lengthier the question is, the easier it is, because you have very clear cut instruction in the question to be followed, and if you follow that to the T, you get to the right answer always. Okay, so let's begin, and let's start with punctuation first, and then we'll start with rhetoric. So let me share my screen here, and I hope all of you can see the whiteboard here. Okay, so let's start with the punctuation part on the ACT examination. And what all do they check us on? So let's begin with the most basic, apostrophe. Then we have semicolons. They check us on colons and dashes. And there are variety of ways that they check us on punctuations. It's not just one punctuation in a question. A question can be a mix of, you know, two, three types of concepts, or two, three types of punctuations. Directly or indirectly, they can check us on all of them. A very, very important punctuation, that is comma. All right. So let's begin with the first one, apostrophe. Uh, it is a very easy punctuation. It is that comma on top that we use with nouns to show possession. Okay. So sometimes it also occurs to our mind that why do they at all check us on apostrophe? It is such an easy punctuation. But trust me, sometimes they give you really tricky questions here. An apostrophe is used for two purposes: to show possession and for contraction. Okay. So let's talk about possession. If I want to say that this book belongs to Meghna, how will I write it using an apostrophe? Meghna's book. Okay. So to show possession, we have to use this whole set of apostrophe s with a noun, and this does the work. Now, when I write Meghna's book instead of this book belongs to Meghna, I convey the same meaning but in very few words. Okay. Contraction is when you contract two words into one with the help of an apostrophe. There you need not use s necessarily. So do not, these two words can be contracted using an apostrophe into don't. And similarly, we have many, many such contracted forms in English language: can't, what's, whose, and there are many others. Okay. Now, when we talk about contraction, we must also talk about some tricky contractions, and they definitely ask you questions on this. So, one very, very commonly asked question on contractions on the ACT is the difference between IT apostrophe S and ITS. Okay, now many, many students get confused here. How to be 200% sure of our answers? See, when I put an apostrophe here, it is an equivalent to it is, or it has. Okay. If I have a question that is asking me to choose between the two, I can simply try the expanded form there. Okay. For example, if I say, don't sit on the chair, it's wobbling. Now, try the expanded form here. Can I write, it is wobbling? Yes, I can. That means this is my correct answer. Okay. But if I give you a sentence that says, don't sit on the chair, its leg is broken. Then, can I write, it is leg is broken? Definitely not. That means I don't need this its. My answer is this one. Okay. Similarly, they may ask you a question on whose and whose. Same difference. Who apostrophe s is equivalent to who is or who has, whereas whose is the possessive form. So whenever possession is in question, we choose whose here. Whose book is this? To give you a very simple sentence. In this sentence, we'll choose whose, this one. I cannot write whose book is this. That would be incorrect, right? Then this is an easy one, there and there. This is a demonstrative pronoun that shows a place or a location, whereas this there is a possessive pronoun. So it is their house. It shows the possession of them over the house. Okay. Then one more combination that may confuse you, and you may get this one also as your option. So be sure that this cannot be your answer because this does not even exist. Okay, there is no such use. Here, your and yours both are possessive words. They both show possession. The difference is this is a possessive adjective. When you say this is your book, your defines the book, acting as an adjective. And here it is possessive pronoun. This is about apostrophes, contractions, and possessions. Okay, let's move on to semicolons. Where can we use a semicolon? We can use a semicolon to join two independent clauses. Okay. If there are two complete clauses, we can join them with a semicolon. We can use a period or a full stop also. But there is only one difference here. Technically two differences, but ACT will check you only for one. The two differences are, the first one, after the semicolon, you begin the next clause with a letter in lowercase. Like I write, I am a student, semicolon. Now, since I is always capital, I'll write I only in capital. But if it was, he is a student, I'll write, he studies in grade 11. So we start with a letter in lowercase. That is not the case with the full stop. If I put a full stop here, I will have to put a capital H here. This is one difference. Second difference that ACT will not check you on, but you may know it, that a full stop or a period can be used between any two independent clauses. Okay, they can be related or they can be strange clauses also. Like I am feeling hungry, full stop, I live in Delhi. There is no relation between these two clauses except for the I, that's a common subject. But a semicolon can be put only between two very, very related clauses. I am feeling hungry, semicolon, I want to eat something immediately. Okay, so here you can put a semicolon or a period. So wherever you can put a semicolon, you can put a period. But At all the places where you put a period, you won't be able to put a semicolon for the same difference that I told you. All right, let's move on to colons and dashes. Very, very important, sometimes confusing or tricky, questions. So let's discuss colons. One common feature that colons and dashes have is that we can use these two punctuations only after an independent clause. Okay. If it is not an independent clause, or if the question is asking me to put a colon or a dash somewhere randomly in a sentence, after a preposition or after a verb or anywhere randomly in the sentence, these two options cannot be my answers. I should eliminate them. Okay. Now, where do we use a colon? We use a colon, or we can use a colon at three places. One, after an independent clause to set off a list of items. For example, if I say, there are a few tasks at my hand today. This is an independent clause. Or I have a few tasks at my hand today. This is also an independent clause. I'll put a colon after this, and then I can list out the things that I have to do during the day. So that serves the purpose here. I'm putting the colon after an independent clause, and I'm giving a list here. Okay. Then, what is the second place I can use a colon at? After an independent clause to further explain or expand that clause. Now, this can be done in the form of another independent clause or a dependent clause or a phrase. It can be anything. So, what do we learn here? That before a colon, we necessarily need an independent clause. But after a colon, it can be anything, right? From a single word to an independent clause, anything, a phrase, a dependent clause, anything. Okay. The third place where we can use a colon is after an independent clause to summarize that clause. When you summarize the whole idea of the clause in one word or term, you use a colon there. Okay. Now, let me give you an example here. If I say my sister has two hobbies, colon, watching clouds and painting landscapes. Okay. Now, watching clouds and painting landscapes is not an independent clause, it's a phrase. But since it is explaining the previous independent clause or further expanding on it, I can put a colon in between and I get a perfectly punctuated and grammatically correct sentence. Okay. If I try to give you an example here, I can say a very, very relevant example I can give you. There is only one thing that can save you from COVID-19, colon, physical distancing. Okay. So this term physical distancing kind of summarizes the main idea of that previous clause, that what is that one thing that can save you from COVID-19? It is physical distancing. This is how we use a colon. Now, a fun fact, at all these three places, we can use a dash also. It works exactly equal to a colon at all these three places. Okay. So whether I put a colon or a dash here or here or here won't make any difference. Other than these three places, a dash has two very, very specific usages. So first one, to separate a non-essential clause or phrase. Okay. So if there is an additional piece of information, which we call non-essential piece of information, it can be separated by either two commas, that is a pair of commas, or a pair of dashes, two dashes. What we can't use is a combination of the two. I can't put a comma here and a dash there, or vice versa. It can either be two commas or two dashes. Second use of a dash is to create a dramatic pause. Basically, a dash is a very, very dramatic punctuation. So if I want to, or if any writer wants to create that long dramatic pause in a sentence, he or she would try to incorporate a dash in that sentence. So if I say, I waited at her doorsteps for 3 hours, dash, only to realize that she is not coming back today. Okay. So this dash creates an element of drama there and creates that long pause to show the intensity of what the writer is trying to convey. Okay. So this is how we use colons and dashes, and trust me, you definitely get at least 2 questions on this. It can be either in the form of these usages or in the form of these usages. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the most important part of punctuations, that is a comma. Very, very important, sometimes very, very confusing, very, very challenging also. So it is important to know where we use a comma, but it is also very, very important to know where we don't use a comma. Okay? All right. So let's begin. We use a comma to separate items in a list. And when we do that, so when do we have a list in existence? Whenever it is more than three or more than 3 items. Okay, 3 or more than 3 items, we have a list there. Now, there are 2 versions of using commas to separate items in a list: A, comma, B, and C, or A, comma, B, comma, and C. Both are correct versions, but according to the ACT standards, you will go with the second one. You will put a comma before and. A, comma, B, comma, and C. Okay. Now, we call this an Oxford comma, and it is very much accepted on this examination. If we don't choose this option, if we go with an option that does not put a comma before and, it will be considered incorrect. This is incorrect. This is correct according to ACT standards. So always go for an option that has a comma before and. Then whenever we begin a sentence with a phrase or a dependent clause, we put a comma after it and then we write the dependent clause. All the non-essential elements are always separated, or they are put into commas. So pair of commas, or it can be pair of dashes also. What else? The transition words. Words like however, moreover, furthermore, etc., will always be in 2 commas. Okay. Where do we not use commas? We don't use commas between compound subjects. What are they? A and B. 2 nouns or pronouns joined with and give you a compound subject. We don't put a comma anywhere around and here. We don't put a comma between a subject and a verb. We don't put a comma immediately after a verb. We don't put commas around prepositions or that. Okay. Now, when they check us on commas, they may ask you a direct question like to separate items in a list, or for this phrase IC, DC, IC. This is very, very common on the ACT, non-essential clauses also. But in some other, questions on punctuations, which are actually not checking you on commas, but on colons or semicolons, you may see an option or 2 that have commas. So if you know where to not use a comma, you can easily eliminate those options. And if you know where to use a comma, you can easily select that option. Okay. So this is pretty much about the punctuation part on the ACT paper. Now we can start with the rhetoric part. I hope you all have got the concepts on these punctuations. Let's begin with the rhetoric part. What all do they check us on rhetorics? So let me give you a list here. Rhetoric questions basically check us on the logical flow of information. Okay, what is the objective behind giving these questions? To check the logic, whether we are able to understand the correct flow of information in the given paragraph or passage or not. whether we are able to analyze and process the given information or not. So it's about your analytical skills, it's about your critical thinking skills, and it's more about the organization of information. Okay, so let's check the kind of questions or the topics that are there in rhetoric. So the first and the very easy one is redundancy and wordiness. Then we have diction and register. Then we have transitions. Very, very important. Addition and deletion questions. And sentence order questions. Okay, let's discuss them. So what is redundancy? Redundancy is repetition, okay? And since it is repetition, it is of no use to us. So we must try to avoid redundant sentences or redundancy from sentences. So very common redundancy usages among the students of your age are ma'am, repeat again, return back, reply back, and so on. Try to avoid these redundancy errors when you speak. What kind of questions you may see in the examination? You may see a sentence like, she has decided to write an autobiography of her life. Now here, of her life is redundant because we are already saying autobiography, which means writing about one's own life. Okay. A very, commonly made error again, or you may see it on the paper also, where you say annual with per year or each year. So if I say we pay an annual electricity bill of 10 lakhs per year, this would be incorrect because we are already saying annual. So we should avoid per year or each year. This is redundancy. Wordiness. Now, the theme of the whole English section on the ACT is to keep it as concise as possible. Okay, to keep it short. We are not supposed to use lengthier sentences. We are not supposed to, go for the lengthier options or options that unnecessarily use too many words. Okay, so the idea here is go for the shortest possible version, the crispiest possible version of the given sentence or underlined sentence. Let me give you an example. Okay, if I say, looking at the weather today, I strongly feel that it is going to rain heavily. Or I may also say, a heavy rain is imminent today, right? In both the sentences, I'm conveying the same message, but one of these two sentences is very, very lengthy. It uses many words, whereas I can convey the same thing using very few words. So I should be choosing the second option. Okay, this is about conciseness or wordiness and redundancy. So we go for the shortest possible version of the given sentence, avoiding the redundancy and use of too many words there, unnecessary words there. Let's talk about diction. Diction on the ACT is actually vocabulary. So there will be around, say, 3 to 4 questions on this, and there are two types of questions that they ask you. One where they give you commonly confused words like accept, accept, practice, practice, or advise, advise, elicit, illicit, allusion, illusion, and so on. Second type of questions that they may ask you is where they give you 4 words of the same family or 4 words that are synonymous to each other, but only one can fit at that particular place in the sentence. This tells us that these questions are always contextual. So you are not supposed to learn the literal meaning of the words, but if you understand the context properly, you can actually get these questions correct. Okay. So sometimes if you don't get the context in one go, you may reread it twice, thrice, so that you understand what are we talking about here, what is this word used for, and then you can choose your correct answer. What is register? Register is the style or tone of the passages. So we are basically talking about the style of writing here. And you will always find that ACT English section will always give you passages in semi-formal kind of language. You will never find a passage that uses Old English or a very technical language, I mean, which uses jargons and all. Uh, Nor you will find a passage that is too informal in its style or approach. Okay, so since the passages are always in semi-formal kind of tone or style, we are supposed to choose the same when it comes to choosing options also. Now, here there is a twist. ACT gives you so many instructions and so many questions, as I said in the starting. But when it comes to this particular question, they rarely give you an instruction. So sometimes you may see a question saying that which option follows the style and tone of the passage. But that happens rarely. You just have to understand this question looking at the options. So if you see these kind of options like my friend has some pretty cool stuff to do, my friend has a plethora of intriguing objects, or my friend has some interesting things to do. Obviously, the answer should be the third one, some interesting things to do, because the first one, pretty cool stuff, is too informal in approach. And the second one, plethora of intriguing objects, is too formal to go with the semi formal tone of the passage. So always go with an option that is simple in language, easily understandable, and conveys the complete meaning or the intended meaning of the writer. Okay? All right. Let's begin with transitions. You get quite handful of questions on transitions, and they are sometimes really very, very tricky. So there is a very common phenomena among students when it comes to attempting transition questions. So the usual approach of students for these questions is try each and every option at that place and see which one sounds better, which one looks better, which one goes in the flow, and then choose that option, which is the most incorrect approach to do these questions. Okay, we should always try to understand the context. So if the two sentences or the two paragraphs are continuing on the same information, then you will choose transition words like moreover, furthermore, in addition, similarly, likewise, and so on. But if the two sentences, I mean, the second sentence contradicts what is given in the first one, then definitely you will go with words like although, however, but, while, despite, whereas, and so on. If I see that between the two sentences, one tells us the cause of something that happened or the result of something that happened, then we'll definitely go with transition words like consequently, thus, therefore, so, because, and so on. Okay, so understanding of the context to get these questions correct is very, very important. Second thing, these transition words will always be either adverbs or conjunctions, and they're always non-essential. Always. So strong transitions like however, moreover, furthermore, they're always non-essential and they will always come with commas. There are some transitions that act more like an adverb. They will not use commas, but otherwise all the transitions use commas around them. Okay? Okay. Let's move on to addition and deletion. These are very standard questions that ask you that the writer wants to add this sentence at this point in the paragraph. Should it be added or not? Or the writer wants to delete the underlined part or the previous sentence. Should it be deleted or not? And they give you four options there: to say yes, to say no, and they have their own reasons. Yes, because of this, or no, because of this. Now, these are very, very subjective questions, and they will always depend on your understanding of the paragraph and the passage given to you. Okay, so one thing, your comprehension comes into picture, your capacity, how well you comprehend the passage and the paragraph. Second, it's not just about reading and doing it. It's more about reading and analyzing the information. So when this question is asking you to add or delete a particular sentence at a particular place, they're actually checking you if you're able to decide whether this information is relevant here or not, whether it makes sense here or not, whether it goes with the flow of the information in the paragraph or not, and so on. So most of the times what will happen that if you read the options carefully, the reasons, you can easily answer these questions, because these reasons will tell you whether this sentence can be added here or not. Then main idea of the paragraph, understanding of the main idea of the paragraph will help you immensely, because that will help you decide whether you can whether you need this information at this particular point in this paragraph or not. So both the types of questions, addition and deletion, can be done on the basis of the main idea of the paragraph, understanding of the paragraph, and careful analysis of the options given to us. Okay. Other than this, in this category only, that is replacement, we have questions that say introduction of the paragraph, which choice most effectively introduces the paragraph, or which choice most effectively concludes the passage. There also, if it is an introduction, please go through the paragraph first and then try to attempt this question. Never ever skim through the paragraph, read it very, very properly, try to get the main idea, and then try to match that main idea to the options. Whichever option matches the main idea may be your correct answer. When it comes to conclusion questions, they will always give you some instructions, like if the author wanted to conclude the passage with so and so, or by emphasizing on so and so. So keep that instruction in mind. And on the basis of that instruction, you can analyze the options and see which one answers what the author is asking us to do. And then you can probably choose your option. Let's talk about the last category of these questions, that is sentence order questions. Okay, so there is, other than sentence order, you may see a question on paragraph order also. When ACT, is trying to give you a question on paragraph order, they will actually mention this instruction even before they start the passage, that the paragraphs in this passage are not in the correct order, and you will be asked to do the same. So you will see the paragraphs numbered. Expect a question on paragraph order. And when you see sentences numbered in a paragraph, expect a question on sentence order. Now, this question on sentence order, this will be the last question of the paragraph. And by the time you reach this question, you would have already read the paragraph very, very carefully. So just work with elimination. Keep that sentence that you have to replace in concern. Read that very, very carefully, once, twice, thrice, until you understand the sentence very, very properly. And then start eliminating the options. After which choice is there after which I can't write this sentence? Look for that and then start elimination and start the process of elimination. Okay. Most of the time you will be, left with two options that may confuse you. Then look for some clues. There are always some clues in the sentence that you have to replace. Pick up that clue, try to relate that sentence with the help of that clue to one of the options that you are left with, and then you're good to go. You're good to choose your answer. So this is, pretty much about the rhetoric questions on the ACT. And you get plenty of such questions, especially addition and deletion questions. So if you have a habit of skipping the information or not reading the entire paragraph or the passage, stop it and get to the habit of reading each and everything very, very carefully in order to get these questions correct. Okay, this is it from my side for today. Over to you, sir.
It was really a great session, ma'am. Never really found English learning to be so easy, and taught it in such a systematic way. Thanks a lot. There are a few questions, ma'am, I would like you to take you through. So, firstly, comparatively, which English section is easier, SCT or ACT?
See, it's not about the content that makes the section easier or difficult. It's about the number of questions and the time given to you. The content that they ask you questions on is almost the same. On the SAT, you get 44 questions to be done in 35 minutes. On the ACT, you get 75 questions to be done in 45 minutes. So if you're good at reading speed and accuracy, ACT will not be a tough nut for you to crack. I mean, especially the English section. If you struggle with time and accuracy, then ACT might give you some challenge, but then it is very, very manageable with practice. So if you attempt good number of tests, you can overcome this problem of speed and accuracy.
Okay, that's great. Like a basic question, ma'am. What are clauses?
Clauses.
Yeah.
Okay. See, there are two types of clauses. This spelling is incorrect.
Yeah.
It is CLAUSES clauses. Yeah. So a clause can be of two types, an independent clause or a dependent clause. Okay. If it is an independent clause, as the name suggests, it can stand on its own as a complete sentence. So if you separate that independent clause from the main sentence and punctuate it with a full stop or whatever punctuation is required, it will be a complete sentence in itself. So it should have a subject, a verb, and a complete meaning. Whereas a dependent clause, as the name suggests, will not be able to stand on its own independently. It is dependent on the rest of the sentence. So it will definitely have the subject and the verb, but it will miss the complete meaning. It will convey a partial meaning. And to complete that meaning, it will depend on the rest of the sentence. This is how you differentiate between an independent clause and a dependent clause. But clauses must have subject and verb. That's the requisite here.
Okay. Okay. What do you mean by a dramatic pause? Could you please elaborate about it?
Yes, sure. A dramatic pause is where the writer, since the writer is writing, he or she is not speaking. So when we speak, we create intonations. We create those effects by the pitch, the sound, the voice. But when you write, and if you want to create some intensity into your writing, you want to emphasize you want to awe your reader, you want to shock your reader, you want to create some drama there. So there you incorporate a dash. Dash is actually a dramatic punctuation.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
There are a lot of many questions. I would just get.
You may choose whichever you want me to answer.
Yeah. One specific situation question that I have seen that sometimes there is a comma after and so if we have two options in which one there is a comma and without a comma, so which is the correct one?
See, a comma and can be correct in two scenarios. Scenario one, when you have a list of items and you put and before the last item, you must put a comma before and. This is according to the point of view of the examination. Otherwise, both the ways it is correct. I can say Riya, comma, Meghna and Jaya. I can also write Riya, comma, Meghna, comma and Jaya. But if you talk about these two examinations, SAT and ACT, the second one that uses the comma before and is considered the correct answer. Okay, this is one situation. Second situation where you use a comma and this combination is between two independent clauses, two complete sentences. But in no case we will put a comma after and. It will always be before and.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ma'am, one specific question about like the student is trying to attempt as many as mocks for ACT, but overall he isn't seeing any improvement. So any tips for such particular situation?
Yes. See, you may solve a good number of tests and you may improve by a point or two. But see, if you are expecting a good improvement, only solving tests will not help you. What matters most is an effective analysis of the test that you have already attempted. So if you attempt a test today and if you make, say, 5 mistakes or 6 mistakes there, and if you want to avoid these mistakes in the next test, your bracket is that I'll not make more than 3 mistakes or 2 mistakes in the next test. Then you must sit with this test, analyze each and every question, not only the incorrect ones, but the correct ones also. Correct ones to know what did I do good here, what did I observe here that gave me a correct answer, and incorrect ones to see what did I miss here. What did I not see here that had costed me one mistake here? This kind of analysis will help you to understand the test in a much better manner. And once you develop that understanding into the paper, you actually get the hang of it.
Yeah, correct, correct. So basically, repetitive attempts of mock isn't going to help you out. Try to analyze them and try to take few steps accordingly.
See,
And
like to interfere here. ACT is all about solving as many tests as you can, but not just solving the test. Solve one test, analyze it, go on to the other one. This is the process. This is how it should happen.
okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, I guess all of the questions have been answered, and the I don't know if in case this question has any answer. This would be the last question for today, ma'am. If I haven't prepared anything for my exams the whole year, how do I cover up my syllabus?
You know this answer very well, Shivam. This is from Shivam, I think.
Yes.
Uh, See, I think if you're attending all the sessions, all the mentors who are here, all the panelists who are here, are constantly telling all of the students that these two examinations are not the examinations for which you can prepare overnight. Or SAT or ACT is not something that can happen in a day or two or a week. So it requires consistent efforts. If you have not yet started preparing, start now. We are never too late. Okay, but it should be a well planned and well prepared attempt. You should not just go and write the test. This will actually demoralize you in turn. So prepare it properly. Wait, you can wait for 3 months, prepare it properly, and then you can target it.
Oh, great. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for this fantastic
My
session
pleasure.
and this
My pleasure.
wonderful
It was
answers.
really good to be here and have an interaction with you
Yes,
and
yes, yes.
yeah,
The
students.
the approach and the easiness of your teaching was really good and admirable. So thank you once again. And to students, stay tuned for our next session. And it's about mathematics algebra. So you would get more idea about it. So thank you once again, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Uh,
Goodbye.